Modifying workspace. So in the previous lesson, we talked about just the layout of Photoshop. In this lesson, I want to talk only about the workspace that we have here on the right-hand side and also our tool panel. So let's drag both of them out. We're just going to place them here, and I'm going to start right away just with the panels and from my workspace, obviously. So I want to just take them apart and show you guys exactly why I keep these certain panels. Okay, let's just move them all out and start from scratch with this. So this is just my technique of working with the panels. You can always remember, go back to Window and select different and new palettes here to create a individual workspace. Now for the beginning, as I mentioned earlier, if it's ticked off, it's currently showing, and if it's not ticked, it's not showing. Say for instance, if I'm going to go to color, that shows up right now, and it's now ticked here, and if I'm going to escape it, it's out of my life again. Great. So these little palettes here are for me the most important ones. I've been working with them for the last 5-6 years, and they've always helped me. And this is just my simple workspace. So let's start talking first about the different panels here. First of all, I have history. It's like a big undo button. Whenever I have something I've photoshopped for quite a while and I need to go a few steps back and my normal edit undo thing does not work anymore, then I will go back to the history and work in my history panel in order to fall a few steps back. So history is very important for me to have in my workspace. Then character box over here. I also have characters because I design a lot. And when I work with text, I right away have all my text tools over here in order to change and enhance the text a little bit. The same goes for paragraph. It's very self-explanatory. It's pretty much like Word and Excel as well. So you can work a bit more just with these tools on your individual text. And then lastly, I do have info in here in order to get values for my RGB or CMY color codes and color ranges. So this is just something that you might do when you're a bit advanced and need specific color ranges. So you can easily hover with the eyedropper tool over the certain color to get the values. Now I drag these into this sequence and this sequence as well here. So history, character box, paragraph, and info. Keep those together in one palette box. And normally I have history always active as the first one. Then underneath of that, I have adjustments and Navigator. Now adjustments are very important later. If you're going to speed up your whole workflow in Photoshop, you might work more with adjustment layers because these are individual layers that adjust your image instead of working from the menu, which affects your images directly. More about that later in the course as well. It's a few different techniques how to work in Photoshop. For now, it's just essential to know that you have adjustment layers here and can work quicker with those. And also now the Navigator. If you're a beginner, it's sometimes very frustrating moving in and out with Photoshop if you're not comfortable with the zoom tool or if you don't know the keyboard shortcuts. So for the beginning, it's very important to just have the Navigator as well, so you can easily go to the Navigator and here with the slider, zoom in and out. Again, adjustment is selected. I'm going to move all of this palette box and clip this right away to the history palette box. So for me, this is halfway my workspace. Then I have layer palette, channels, and paths. Now layers, you will always need layers because obviously you're photoshopping in a layer system. So you always need to know where your layers are and you'll need to work with layers. So layers is always important for me to have in my workspace. Then as well, channels, I'll move that also in here. Channels is more or less for me when I work later with my CMY color or even RGB colors, and I can see my individual channels that are just made up from all my red tones, yellow tones, purple tones, etc. to work quicker in those. More about that in the course later. And then also paths, let's move that in here. Once you get more advanced with working with the pen tool, paths also come in really handy. So let's clip this also again. This is my very simple workspace. Again, history, adjustments, and layers. All of that, I move to the right hand side and clip again into my layout. Again, remember, you can always change your workspace here and create something unique and different for every individual thing that you need in the future again here. Or if you want to right away now, create one and later save it. Let's also, before we go there, first talk about just the tools here. So you'll see here's the tool panel. In CS6 and CS5, this is pretty much standard and you are not able to adjust this or create your own little toolbox. So you will need to work with whatever Photoshop gives you. But in CC, you have these three little buttons here. I'm going to hit right click and say edit toolbox. And now I can individually create my own custom toolbox. It's a really great update for CC to, in order, obviously, only put in these tools that I like to work with. Obviously, everybody has a different workflow. So these are the tools that I mostly work with. I do not want to talk about the tools right now. That will happen later in the course. But for now, it's just important to see what type of tools do I actually have in my toolbox. So as you guys can see, I don't have everything in here because I don't work with all of these tools. So instead of pushing everything in there, only add what you really need. Okay, but once you get more comfortable with Photoshop, you might think, okay, I'll use this tool too, or this tool, and refine again your toolbox. Okay, once you're ready and once you have moved everything, so it's also very easy, it's just a drag and play system. You can literally just drag it in and out, and again, you guys can now see here is again the polygon lasso tool. If I drag this out again, it disappears from my toolbox. Once you're good with that, you can either save your preset here and then load it again, or you can just hit done for now, move this over to the side, and this is your layout. And now, very important, going over to the drop-down menu over here, and we have to now save this. So we're going to go over to new workspace, because you have finished your workspace, but you're now saving it as a new workspace. So we will save it here as beginner. Okay, so this is our beginner setup. And now also capture, please, panel locations with the saved in this workspace. So this means keyboard shortcuts, yes. We want to have the menu from the top, yes. And our toolbar here as well. Now, I didn't talk about keyboard shortcuts. I do not create my own keyboard shortcuts. I stick to the standard Photoshop keyboard shortcuts because they are always the same and I'm used to those. And I would suggest you get also familiar with the standard keyboard shortcuts. Okay, I'm going to hit save. And right away, this whole workspace has been now saved. On the right hand side again, you guys can see here's my Rita Pro workspace, or again the beginner. So say for instance you open Photoshop and it looks like this and you are completely confused. Why is it different now? Then simply go to the drop down menu and select beginner, and you're back to your setup and to your workspace. Great, so that's one feature now that I wanted to teach you, is just the workspace. Now again, we talked also earlier about this. I want to talk about the application frame that we still have active. Here in the background, we still have the desktop. So this is just the Photoshop desktop. If I'm quickly going to open a new canvas, which I'll teach you guys in a minute, this is what it will look like if you have a canvas open. So again, you'll have a little bit of a drop-down menu here, and again, you'll have just the canvas over here with also a little bit of a tab. So this is obviously your canvas now. You're working on your Photoshop file, and in the background, you still have the gray background, which is obviously the application frame. Now, if we go to Window and select Application Frame Off, you'll see it disappears, and I have my background, my desktop background again in front of me. So I can easily now click on here and get back to the desktop, or click here and get back into Photoshop. So this is like kind of my workspace. I do not keep the application frame on because I'm always then in Photoshop. Then I always need to break down the complete Photoshop in order to get to my desktop and go back to Photoshop again. I rather work like this, application frame off, and I can now switch easily between desktop and Photoshop. And now when I start working just in Photoshop, this obviously becomes irritating later. So what I do is press the keyboard shortcut F in order to go also into a kind of an application frame system. So now I do have the Photoshop background in the background and also the desktop, and I'm not distracted by my actual computer desktop. If I hit F again, I go in the complete full screen mode, and Photoshop blends it out the whole workspace and the layout, and I can only see my image, zoom in, zoom out, etc. If I press F again, I'm back to my normal Photoshop mode, again without the application frame. Also in CC, you will have these little buttons here on the left hand side in your workspace. That also means if you click here, it does exactly the same like the F, the full screen mode. And if you click this again, it even gives you a warning. It's going into the full screen mode now. So when you want to get out of this, press F again or escape. So say full screen mode, great. And now I'm going to press escape and I'm back to my normal setup. So this depends completely on you. If you like the application frame and if you want to work like this, if you have more canvases, obviously they will show up here. or if you want without application frame. That is totally up to you. I am a person that works like this and just hits F every time I start photoshopping, and I'm happy now and I can start. So that was all about just modifying your workspace. The next lesson will be now about the menu and running through the menu a little bit.